Every day there is a forgetting, and every moment there is the possibility of remembering. Remembering who you truly are, awakening to your body, to the inner world and experience of being alive. Here is where you find the beauty, the joy. Here is where you free your soma. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Free Your Soma, Stories of Somatic Awakening and How to Live from the Inside Out. I'm Amy Takaya, the host of the podcast and the creator of the Radiance program. And today I have a very special guest. Zoe Hewett is a yoga teacher. We actually did our yoga training together back in 2011. She's an exercise physiologist, a mother of two, and graduated Radiance earlier this year, in January, right? Wasn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, and we're going to explore somatic movement, Hanna Somatic movement today, its impact on her life and her career from a few different angles. So, when I first kind of created this program, I immediately thought of some of the people in my world who I had yoga relationships with, and one of them was Beth Warner, who is a mutual friend of ours. And, Beth was interested in trying out Radiance and doing the somatic, Hanna Somatic movement because she had become a physical therapist, right? But it took her a little bit of time to organize that. And then she joined in the winter of 2022 for, I think, the second official round of my group program. And during that time, she was connecting with you and you were becoming curious about this. And it wasn't until later in 2023 that you joined the program as well. I'd love to just kind of explore that, for you, there was a lot going on in your life at that time in the winter of 2022 when you first kind of got this initiation into this way of moving from Beth. Can you kind of explain like a little bit about where you were at that time? We can also go back even a little further eventually, but like right at that time in 2022, what was your life like? What was going on inside of you?
Well, 2022 July, my second daughter was born, and I had what I would call what felt like a traumatic experience. I didn't come out with big birth injuries or anything like that, but I felt as though something had happened to me and I hadn't really been an active participant in the childbirth process. And it was kind of like a bit of a trigger, I think, to feel so when I was I guess when Beth was enrolled, which was 6 months later, so my daughter was 6 months old, there was I had in no way or shape or form processed what had happened. I had just tried to keep going with caring for my older daughter and for this newborn baby. But deep down, I really felt like something was not right, and it was going to come out at some point. But I just felt so disconnected. I felt like I'd given away my power, my trust into people who are the professionals, which is a bit of a theme in my life looking back, and is part of the reason why the Radiance program and the somatic work has been so important and transformative to me. So I was just kind of treading water. I was treading water and I was looking for a way out. And I just felt like I wasn't sure how I was going to help myself get there. I could kind of see that something would come good. I just didn't know what it was. And it ended up being a couple of different things. But learning that Beth was doing the program, she's someone who I trust professionally and personally. And I was like, what is that thing? I'm going to have a little bit of a look into it. So before I joined Radiance, I had actually started some somatic practice on my own. And it was like almost immediately quite profound. And it sort of rocked my world. Like it didn't fix everything for me, but it gave me a taster of this movement, the practice, and how I could experience immediate change in my body, and how empowering that was to me to do that myself. Of course, I'm following the lead, but I was doing it myself and I could create a better outcome. And that was kind of the start, like that seed planted to doing more and more of that to help myself process the childbirth. And also, they say that parenting becoming a parent, you could kind of go on happily without becoming a parent and be able to manage all the things that have happened in your past. I've heard this before. When you become a parent, it comes right front and center. You have none of the tools you had before. You can't go to yoga class all the time. You can't go and do all these things for self-care. And then you're kind of stuck with this, like, this is my history, right? Like these things are coming back up, coming back up. So yeah, it was the start of that, like pulling the thread, and it got like it didn't just get nice and neat and tidy, like it got messy. But it was a really like that was a powerful moment at the end of 2022, sort of when I started looking into that movement practice, somatic movement practice.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that now, in 2024, somatic is becoming more of a buzzword. And I'm seeing these cute little videos on Instagram of like somatic movements and what we do in Hannah some ways, because it's very specific in the way that we are inviting a very specific part of your brain to release the musculature. And it's different than just kind of moving around and feeling into your body, which has
Mhm.
benefit too. But this is like a very specific way of kind of completing a stress loop, so to speak, in your
Mhm.
brain, completing the cycle of activity from going on, right?
Mhm.
By the focus on the letting go part of the movement
Yeah,
and the focus on the resting part of the
yeah,
movement, rather than the focus being on the intensity of the movement, which I would say
yeah,
that our background with hot yoga is a lot about the intensity of the movement, and how
yeah,
intensely you can do something would be a sign of how good you were at it, or how precise you were at it was how much force or power focus you could bring into the activity
yeah.
itself. So it's almost like the opposite in a way.
I know. And it's like sort of like this, it's like what can you create with this, with your effort, and versus this idea of like what is already there? Like what can
Mhm.
you allow? Like what are you not listening to? Like this total, yeah, opposite side of the coin. Which is really like it took, I mean, even in the program, I'm like, oh, I'm doing that too big. I'm always doing it too big. Why can't I do it smaller? Like, why is that a challenge to move less, to move smaller? And I'm seeing that in my work now when I'm trying to share some of this practice. It's really challenging. I'm sort of seeing people, I'll try to guide through people through it. I'm like, no, do less, do less. This is a part of this session that is not based on doing more, working hard, feeling a burn, feeling sort of discomfort. So that's really interesting too, trying to find where it sits in that space as well.
Yeah, because I think that both are beneficial. It's kind of like the yin
Mhm.
and the yang. It's not like we want to have a life where we don't put out effort, but we don't
Yeah.
want that to be the only way that we function, because then we will eventually burn ourselves out, or
Mhm.
have muscle cramping, or joint, wear and tear that might not be yeah, might be preventable if we had another way of operating as well, if we had a way to actually tone down and use the exact amount of effort needed for this moment versus just always plowing through every experience with
Yeah.
110%.
Yeah. I mean, it's very like in that with the way you just said that, it's so relevant to the rehab space. I mean, a lot of the time people come in, we can all relate to this. We use our bigger muscles to stabilize when really our smaller muscles have forgotten kind of what to do. Those muscles closer to the spine, these stabilizing muscles. But so it's that very idea, like not trying to muscle through. So it's really like it is closer. um, they do work together. It's a symbiotic relationship. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think also that, going back to what you said about that sort of giving yourself over to the professionals and leaving
Mhm.
the shifts and changes that were to be made in your body, like kind of giving that power over to somebody else. And I do remember that being kind of, right at the Radiance program was like you were really recognizing that you had, as you mentioned before, a history of sort of giving over the authority or the
Yeah,
agency of what your body should or shouldn't do to
yeah.
somebody else. And I mean, maybe you want to share a little bit about like kind of where that history started for you in your life.
Yeah, yeah, I was nervous about Radiance because of that. I'm like, here I am again, sort of signing up to something where someone else is going to share what they know with me. And I'm like, oh, when do I stop with this cycle? It turned out to be really different, of course. But that, so I grew up doing competitive gymnastics, and that was sort of from the age of like 3 when I started just recreationally until pretty much all the way until I was 20. I went over to the States to a college over there, Boise State University. So I did have a break, a major break in there because I had a major injury. Probably I should have taken that as a sign to, move into something else, but I came back into the sport and kept going for a few years. And I have, no regrets about that. That was a wonderful time of my life overseas. But so from very early on, I have been in an environment where I've been coached and told what to do, when to do it, um, to keep pushing. I think things are different now, but to keep pushing, to not know what pain meant, to not be able to register when was too much or too little, and to always feel an emotional connection to being in pain, and also and a reflection on myself. So let's say the coach, like I'm in pain, I'm injured, but I don't want to say something because that will reflect poorly on me as a child, as a person. It almost feels, and it's a relationship of love, of positive energy. So if I sort of have that injury or pain, I lose that attention and I lose that connection with these people that are I see like almost every day, many hours a day. So that was sort of my childhood and teenage years. And in with that too, like spending time with medical professionals when I'm injured, go see the sports doctor, see the physiotherapist. And again, it's these treatments, which I think like, that are done sort of to you, and you're part of the exercise rehab side of things. Of course, you have to be, but I think particularly as a child, it's hard to make adult decisions as a child. And my parents, it was hard for them too. They're trusting the professionals as well. So that sort of started, I think, really this cycle of leaning into what other people think about my performance, the condition of my body, how I feel, really led to sort of just not listening to actually how I feel, when is enough enough, can I say no? Just having this authority myself. I think I lost, or it got hidden through those years, and it, sort of continued for a bit and showed up in childbirth or after childbirth, where felt just really out of control and couldn't regain that control. That's what it felt like. So yeah, that was kind of
Yeah,
the lead
and
up.
I think like what you just described, I think for a child, children already are slowly building their proprioceptive awareness and building their ability to communicate about what they experience. And
Yeah.
if you're, as you described as a child, intentionally like not saying how you feel because you don't want it to be reflected poorly, then
Mm.
there's basically like limiting that ability to, that ability to flourish in you, for that ability to say and express and work out how to say what you're experiencing internally. It's being unintentionally stunted by you, like because you're holding
Absolutely.
back, because you're not saying what's
Yeah.
going on, so they
Yeah.
can't know, right? And so
Yeah.
then that process of trusting that I can say what I'm experiencing and someone's
Yeah.
going to help me, right? Or that it's
Yeah.
going to be heard. Instead, you were
Yeah.
doing the opposite. You were keeping that stuff inside.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm not sure how else it would have gone. Like, it'd be great to be able to go back and do it, do it again, and be like, what if I just said everything that was on my mind, and how would that have panned out?
Yeah, totally. I mean, maybe you would have gotten more attention. Maybe this idea that you
Maybe.
weren't,
Like, what is this?
yeah. Maybe if you were like, oh, she's really high maintenance, and they just, gave you all the attention because you were, so vocal about your,
Yeah.
what was going on. I don't know.
Yeah.
But what I do remember is that during Radiance, you kind of had these little realizations throughout the program where you realized that you could ask your husband for things that you needed, and that you
Yeah.
could ask him for the space that you needed if you were feeling overwhelmed,
Yeah.
and that you could ask him to step in and take over for 15 minutes so you could go take care of yourself. And it was
Yeah.
like this revelation because you hadn't been doing that.
Totally. And he's the type of person who's just like, yeah, just say it, just tell me. He's got a thick skin. It's not like Like he's the like we're so well matched in that sense that, I could do all these things. I can, and I can and will sort of continue to practice this skill that I want to improve because I want my daughters to be better at it than I am, so I have to do the work. So yeah, that perfect opportunity to practice asking and practice saying and not catastrophizing the thing before I say it. Like it's that whole sort of thought process that I guess the anxious thought process, what would happen if I said this and it's like, hang on, just go back a step. Just ask the thing, let the person have their moment, respond, and go from there. It's quite,
Right.
it could be quite
Right.
simple.
But there was some event, and I mean, that be something maybe, your body might let you know at some point when you ask the question, but like there might have been some event when you were very little, say you were like 3 or something or 4, and, you let somebody know that like you had hurt yourself or, some scenario happened at some point, and it was
Mm.
probably, from the outside world's perspective, like very mundane, where like you let people know what you were experiencing and you kind of got shut down or got put on the sidelines or were kind of dismissed for a moment because they were busy with the other kids or whatever it
Yeah,
was. And you
yeah,
got the message that you don't do that if this is going to be the consequence. And so then that anxiety of not wanting to speak up started just moving in you and informing your actions. And it's kind of
sure.
how these things go. Sometimes it's these very kind of mundane little moments that we get some kind of programming and then we just run with it. It becomes a habit.
Yep, I agree. I agree. And sometimes it's not even your thing. Like I've got a memory of watching my mum and my sister, older sister, having a fight. Like my sister was a teenager. Like it was all within the realms of normal family stuff, right? But I was so uncomfortable with what was happening. And like no one checked in with like I'm sensitive growing up. So like no one checked in with me about how I responded to this fight that wasn't even mine. Like but those moments where you're not even part of it, and probably they do get overlooked because it's like, hang on, what I don't know what you were upset about. But I think you're exactly right. Like it could just be the smallest thing, not even your thing, but it like we are experiencing our own and each other's energy all the time and trying to navigate through that with the skills that we have at that time. And I guess if we could do better at that time, we would have.
Yeah.
And I do think that's important to remind myself of is like, if I knew better, if I could do better, then I would have done better. So it's okay. Just try to, just do it better now that you know with what you know. It'll keep changing.
Totally. Totally, and there's something that is powerful about like getting to this point with your children where you have that breakthrough in raising them, for them, with them, even in their
Yeah.
presence, that they can actually, you know, experience that shift from being sort of externally focused to
Yeah.
having a more internal focus. They get to actually see or experience energetically that pathway to get there, because there's this
Yeah.
world is very focused on the external, and we are often, especially as, women, but also as, anybody who's being physical in your body, as a dancer, as a yogi, as a sports player, there's going to
Yeah.
be a focus on your body in terms of what it can do. And if it's doing these things right, which was another thing that I, noticed came up for you a lot during the Radiance program, was like, am I doing this right? Because
Yeah.
there had been a programming that there's a right way and a wrong way to move your body, right?
Yeah.
And so that's something also that's really interesting to start to break down and see a different perspective in the Hanna Somatic movement, because you can't really do it wrong.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's hard to change the way I suppose I think about those things, but it is changing. Like the kind of I guess the kind of not quite perfectionism, but the outward expression or look of a posture in yoga or uh that used to be much more important many years ago, but from a good place. Like I thought, this is how I teach the technique, and this is what it should sort of look like in this direction at least, and that way I know you're getting benefit and this, that, the other. Now I just teach so differently to that that I can't. I mean, first of all, I just immediately acknowledge I cannot possibly know when I step into the room what any person in there is going through, what they're capable of, what they're not capable of, and what they're deciding to show up for themselves that day. So it's a immense release of pressure on the teacher. I
Mm.
don't have to do anything but facilitate a stress-free or lower stress experience of this particular type of yoga for them to show up and do it themselves. That has been like a great relief as a teacher, um, but also so like empowering, like so much empowering for the students in there. I sort of now balk at the idea that we think we know better than the person on the mat, even if that's a first time coming to class. It's like you already know so much about how to take care of yourself, all of those things, and I don't assume that role anymore. And I don't think I did it from a place of sort of power or malice or anything like that. It just was the way I learned. It was the way kind of indoctrinated in the way we practiced from the people who taught us. Then we went and learned ourselves, and we sort of learned the same kind of model. So it's been a really interesting process in the last, like, since Radiance, of trying to kind of untangle this teaching piece for myself and see what's left there, like what's left in this practice that I value. Can I still connect with it in a different way? And I'm still kind of like playing with that. And I'm glad. I think sort of in the past I'd have the tendency to be a little bit like, oh, that's not working, so I'm just going to throw that thing to the side. Whereas with the somatic, like through Radiance and the idea of somatic movement and the principles behind it, it's kind of like, well, no, it doesn't have to be like, this isn't the one thing. This is sort of the thing that brings you a bit closer to yourself and closer to your truth and what you then will be good for you, not so good for you. You get to make choices. So I think that's probably been one of the most important things coming out of the program for me, is this idea that it's not one thing or the other or the other. It's could be any of those things, and it could be a combination of the things. And so it doesn't, and it could change over time. Like if it's not serving you, you sort of move on, or you take the pieces with you that you want. And I've never really felt that sense of like power for myself before to choose what in my life is going to create value and what isn't going to create as much value. So
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, and how it changes also. It's sort of something that is constantly shifting and evolving from moment to moment in our lives. And that's, I think the piece for me, because I had a similar experience, I would say, as you, in terms of I started practicing the movements on my own before getting like any official guidance in it from videos on YouTube and a little bit of like phone conversation with my dad, right? And then
yeah,
doing the movements on my own. And, kind of what happened for me is I got in touch with my body in a new way,
yeah,
where I started really noticing the patterns in me, the physical patterns, but also the mental and emotional patterns that
yeah,
that previously had been pretty unconscious, but were starting to become unbearable in my
yeah,
physical experience. And I would say that, that's fairly common for people who first start this work, is they come into it bound,
mm-hmm.
clenched,
Mm-hmm.
tight in
Yeah,
different areas of their body that have never known anything else. And then they do this little seemingly inconsequential movement, and they experience a change, like a rapid change in the length of that musculature. And also, they experience being able to access that musculature. And it can be quite startling because now you become aware, so much more aware of the patterns in your body that are
mm-hmm.
not really functional, or are not, or are
Yeah,
part of a way of being that you are coming to realize does not really serve you or serve your life.
mm-hmm.
And so, the interesting thing is that even in all of the little movements that we do, the reason I say there's no wrong way to do it is that if I give you an instruction to do a movement, say an arch of your back, and what you get is flattening your back, the opposite movement, you didn't do it wrong. You actually did what your body or your nervous system probably needed most. Your body went and did the thing that it did because it was the easier thing to do, which means it was probably the tighter musculature that was
Yeah.
already doing that, was already clenching your stomach. And so
Yeah.
that was how you interpreted what I said because it's what your body actually needed. Going back to that thing that, how am I to know what you're
Mm.
experiencing and what your body needs? It could need
Yeah.
something totally different than an arch at the beginning of the practice. I mean, eventually it'll need the arch because we're
Yeah.
usually tight everywhere.
Yeah.
But maybe at that moment, what your body needed was the tiniest little flatten or a lifting
Yeah.
of your head or something else, right?
Yeah. And I love that side. I love that principle of somatic movement. It's like, oh, where are you tight? Let's go there. Like let's not try to pull against that, which is so much of what I've sort of like we all I think have lived with in like exercise prescription or and yeah, there's still a place for those things. But yeah, it's just this different way of thinking about working with your body, which that like no right or wrong, do the thing that your body's done, like and let that be the right thing. It's so I really like that sort of example of, oh yeah, you did a flatten, but how could that be right? Like that's not at all what Amy said to do. Like why did that happen? But it's like, oh yeah, let's just like don't worry about like following the rules, basically. You know, it's going to be a little bit different for everyone. Um,
Totally. And that's,
and that's it.
one of the reasons I think this work is really meant to be done, one-on-one as well as in a kind of more group class setting or self-paced setting, because there's so much individual like patterning that's in our bodies. Kind of going back to even what you were saying when you walk in the room into the yoga studio, everybody in that room has different muscle patterns that are more primary to their body. And so that's why you
Yeah.
see that some people are going to be really good at this pose and other people are going to be really good at this pose because we're good at whatever is closest to our patterns.
I know. And then the Western way is to kind of reinforce how good you are at that thing. And so we keep going there, the sort of in this like forceful, more forceful kind of intentional way.
Right, right. And then the things that we're not good at, we can be really hard on ourselves and like really
Right.
push hard into those spaces that we're
Yeah.
not good at. We think we need to do more and more of that thing that
Yeah.
is hard, and that, I mean, there were so many things about that were part of me ending up injuring myself multiple times, and I talk about that on the podcast with Beth, just the hypermobility and at the time
Yep.
there wasn't a lot of knowledge about that, you know.
Yeah.
And now I feel like, and maybe you can speak to this, with the yoga community that you have in, Australia. And then as your work as an exercise physiologist, there is more awareness of that than there was 15 years ago or whatever, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And so Beth, I used to own a studio here in Canberra, and Beth taught at that studio. And we really started to change the way, like it didn't work 100%, but we were changing the way. This is maybe several years ago, like 5, 6, 7, like several years ago, right? Changing the way that we looked at this, particularly this hyperextension issue thing. We were sort of trying to help people against the grain, but to help people get into a position where their muscles could contract to support their joints better, to create a sustainable practice that would be injury free, more likely. But it was hard. It's so hard. You need so much, need a lot more awareness and strength. And in the group setting, that is challenging. It's challenging to help the individual, particularly when the way of teaching is to the stiff body in this particular line of yoga. Yeah, like it's to the stiff body, so it doesn't, these other people who create the beautiful postures kind of fall through the cracks sometimes because they've got things going on too where they could create more balance, like more balance, more awareness, more ease, more flow, like better flow of breath, like just a calmer nervous system during the practice. So we really, like, I think that we did a lot of work together to try and change the way we were teaching, particularly with the knee, like this locked knee, hyperextended knee, which didn't affect everyone in that moment. But we thought like probably in the long term, it's not going to be great for regular practitioners. So there is change around that. I haven't done a lot of sort of traveling, teaching in my recent years. I've been busy with other things. I'm not sure what's happening everywhere, but there's certainly, I think there is certainly this space being created to practice differently and for students to feel, certainly I hope to pass this to my students, to feel like they have permission to try something different for their body to create a better, more sustainable outcome. So I think there is like more awareness around this idea. Like sort of, I guess the hot yoga world, Bikram yoga world has been in a state of sort of evolution in a way over the last many years. And this would be, I think this is part of it, like people sort of standing up a bit and saying, oh, I'm not sure that's always the right thing for everyone, and try
Oh,
to do it
yeah,
a bit safer and a bit better, and let people tell us as well, like what's not working and
totally.
responding.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, my dad was the one who got me into Bikram yoga, and he never even tried to like do full standing head to knee. He never tried to do wall walks or crazy back bends. He was just this, guy in his late 50s coming
Yeah.
in to do some yoga because it helped with the pain in his foot. He didn't have
Yeah.
this kind of intense ambition around it that I had, and so he didn't hurt himself. He never experienced
Right.
hurting himself because he was never pushing himself so hard. He was just
Right.
staying in the room and doing his thing. And,
Yes.
I was the one who came into it with all this vim and vigor and pushing and, really getting attracted to those teachers who pushed me. And
I know, I can totally relate. I watch my partner Pete, who does this practice as well, and is like, that's describing his practice in this way that he's just like totally listening to his body. And from the outside, like that's just looks like the strangest thing as a teacher. It's like, what is happening there? Like that looks different to what it can look so different, but he gets so much out of it. And it is this sort of thinking that one way is the right way, but really it's, if anything, like just it's too much. So yeah, it's
yeah,
a lot more happening than we can ever know from watching the posture or the
totally. And
shape.
the shape of the posture and the banana leg and like the hyperextension that I had going on, and it's a kind of a funny thing because people who have hypermobile joints, they have less proprioceptive awareness of what their body is and what's happening. It actually
Yeah,
goes with the hypermobility is having this lack of awareness that they then have to build that awareness. And part of
yeah,
that is bringing a little bend into their knee, but more than
yes,
that, it's releasing the muscle patterns that are pulling their bodies into that hyperextended position. So I am happy to say that unless I get really, really stressed out, I don't have hypermobile joints anymore. And I don't stand with my legs bent backwards anymore because I've sufficiently released, and we talk about this in Hanna Somatics, the green light reflex and the red light reflex, and those two pulling on each other in a
yeah,
body that doesn't have proprioceptive awareness, right? That has not had that same like structural awareness,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah,
And that was me from an early age, that if you don't have that and you get pulled into these red light, green light stress patterns, that basically
yeah,
puts you in that hyperextended position. That's like
yeah.
essentially like undoing that undid my hypermobility. And I built so much more proprioceptive awareness. So I can feel when I'm in those patterns, right?
Yes. And like it's so related to stress. I mean, you know that. But the patterns and the where we feel comfortable enough for a moment to deal with a big thing, we kind of get stuck there, right? Like it's that, like, where do you go? Do you go like here, or do you go in that green light or the red light, and then the knees push back and the quads contract, and like what happens? And then like you deal with that thing, but then we never release it, right? And that's kind of the clearing. That's the somatic work, is like the clearing of the tension that's gonna will inevitably happen. And I really like the reminders throughout Radiance that you gave, like for this idea that like you'll have stress, but now you have a tool. Like you have stress, you're gonna have patterns that your body does these amazing things to protect you and to help you move forward in life, right? It's just having this tool to kind of check in, have more awareness, and clear that tension every so often. So you sort of then can start from a better, more connected place to then go do the next thing. So it's so related to the stress thing. And I think we don't recognize that so much. And what I do find a little bit challenging in the space that I'm in now, working in the space I'm in now, is, there's not much time. Like, I'm working one-on-one with people, but they're short. These are short sessions. Typically it's 30 minutes. If I want to do any somatic work with them, that's like, oh, that takes time. I don't want to rush it. But then there's this other piece that I sort of need to do. And there's this education around, like, we do it, but I don't know if we really understand it. There's an education around your body, but also this stress that you have in your brain will affect the tissues in your body, will affect these contraction patterns, will affect your rehab outcomes. So we know it, and we certainly do like incorporate that in the sort of in the world of exercise physiology. But I'm still sort of navigating this new position, this new role, which is sort of up and down and back and in, and I'm trying to find a place for just helping people feel better, so that then what we do is, like, we can layer on top of that regulated nervous system some work to target, like, for their target areas, like it's an injury, or it's like it's a pain caused by muscular imbalance, like whatever we're working on, to sort of start from a more regulated place where your body's more ready to accept what's going to happen next. It's like, yeah, okay, we're ready to. I'm in a good space to change, basically, to change the pattern.
Yeah. Yeah, that actually is, I think, when people can get into that peaceful, kind of calmer place inside themselves, that's actually where the healing goes deep. That's where things
Yeah.
really start to make a big difference. I had a woman that I worked with at the festival that I was just at, and I was doing these little micro sessions, like 30 minutes. So, I mean, I hear you on that. I
Sounds
hear
so
you on the
long.
challenge. It's so challenging.
Yeah,
So, like,
yeah,
here I have a person coming to me, 30-minute session. They've never heard of somatics. I'm showing them what it is, and I need to make a difference in 30 minutes for them because they're paying me, at the festival, I was like getting $75 for 30 minutes. That's a good price, and I'm like, I got to do something interesting with you that's going to give you some kind of relief, and
connection to
so
it,
it's
right? Yeah.
totally, and give you some kind of insight. But, I had a woman come and I was like, oh, how are you? And, she was like, oh, I'm having such a great day. I feel so good, and then as she's talking, it was cute because we do pies in Radiance, physically, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually. And she just basically gave me her pies. I was like listening and I was like, wow, she's taking this like all these places. She went into some things about her dad dying and then her stepdad dying and, how she'd been really like, holding everything together, but that she
Yeah.
felt like she was in a really good place now. And, she went from just this like really good place of feeling really good to having a big emotional release in the 30 minutes that we had together. And it reminds me of what you're saying of like when we can get ourselves to that place where we're actually feeling good, it may seem counterintuitive, but that's when stuff comes up because we're in a
Yeah.
place that our nervous system knows we can actually handle it. When we're
Yeah.
all the way stressed out all the time, our nervous system's like, oh, better not deal with the grief right now.
Oh yeah, it just bounces off the shield. It's like, no, can't, won't, like, system will break down if if we go there. Yeah.
Yeah, it was amazing to just get to be with her in that. And I brought it up. I was like, this seems like, oh, why is this happening? I was in such a great mood, but it's like, oh, this was happening because you were feeling actually pretty good. And so your body felt safe enough to let this out, and afterwards she felt so much clearer and so much better, and we did like maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 movements, hand facilitated movements though, which you haven't experienced yet, but they're
No,
amazing.
I know. I'll just wait for you to come out here, Amy,
I
or
gotta
not.
come.
Let me come
Meet me
there.
in Bali. Meet me in Bali. How about that?
Oh, yes. Hey, that's a happy, like, compromise for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll happen. But
That's
yeah,
awesome.
like I love that you're kind of starting to include and play with how to, you know, bring in those somatic movements because it's going to have the same effect on these people that you're working with that it had on us, which is that they will become aware of the patterns in their body and we can only
Yeah.
change what we are aware of.
Yeah. I think that's the scary part, is like you sort of feel this unraveling, especially throughout the program. Like, I went through some like the terrible rib pain and thoracic pain, and like it was so intense. And I started with the neck pain and the shoulder thing, and it just I sort of was like, wow, I don't feel like I can feel things happening, but how many layers do I want to peel back? Like, it's not exactly always feeling good. It just kind of reveals something else. And I think that is what felt initially like a bit scary or intimidating, or like, do I have the space in my life to go there right now? And obviously I didn't until I did. You don't until you do, until you're ready for it, right? But the other side to that is, while you're doing that sort of release, is the fear lessens, because you then realize, oh, I've got this tool that I can use throughout the week, or I can use in the car and just do a little bit of this and that. And actually, it takes me less time to reset that, or to sort of like come out of pain and sort of listen to what's happening in my body. So I don't get stuck there. So then the fear around pain has changed for sure. And the fear around like not understanding what's happening with my body. And still, if I don't understand it, I'm like, oh, yeah, something feels like it's twisted that way and the shoulders that way, like whatever, something's twisted there. I can understand it a bit more now, and I can do something to reduce the noise and sort of get myself out of a level of discomfort that is interfering with my day to day. So even though it's that unraveling and feeling a little like, oh, am I losing control? It's like, no, 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 no. You're gaining the control at the same time, to keep clearing that, like just to keep
Yeah.
clearing those layers as they build up in the
And not
body.
everybody was experiencing that in Radiance. I think that you were experiencing that because you have such a history of injury in your body, and you have
Mm.
such a history of physical training in your body from a very
Yes,
early
and
age.
totally. And like the one-sidedness, and yeah, just doing things to create the shape and to create the outcome in a very specific way. Absolutely. So, yeah.
Yeah. I remember you saying how familiar some of those patterns felt. Like you were like, oh, I've experienced this particular
Yeah.
kind of rib pain or neck pain before,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
what your body did was, it was just like, because there was no way to actually deal with that, it just layered the next pattern of life on top of that. And so you were experiencing
Absolutely.
this accumulation. What I loved was like when you had those breakthrough moments, like I remember you saying, you'd been having all this stuff showing up in your like IT band or like lower back area. And then there was this breakthrough moment where you were like, my legs are inwardly rotating when I'm walking.
Yeah. It's like I actually can feel my legs doing something different. It's like I'm walking differently. Yeah, I do remember that. And like that feels pretty profound when you feel like you stand differently or walk differently, or that's, yeah, that feels profound. Something you do every day. And
Right.
it
And
just
you're
like,
not trying.
yeah, you're not even trying. You've just done this little bit of sort of given a bit of attention to what's happening, and it has just made something a bit easier. It's like letting the joints be where the bones be in a position where they are happy, and then your muscles can do what they like to do. And it's just this harmonious thing that sounds like it should be pretty natural for everyone. But of course, it isn't, because we do life. We do, yeah, all these things. And yeah, it's again, like we've said a couple times now, but it's not that those things are wrong, or that they're damaging, or that they're this or they're that. It's like, do the things you want to do and help yourself do it by just taking care of yourself in those moments, to like undo the stress, undo the tension, reset, so you can start again tomorrow. And it's, yeah, it's not going to accumulate forever. Because it
Yes.
does
Yeah.
feel like
It's
that at some point. Like before I started Radiance, I would get this, I'd get these twinges in my back that would just, like in my thoracic spine or in my neck, and they would just be coming more regular. They were just, and I'm like, wow, where's this going next? Like, where does this go next? And that's just like, that tightens everything up even more, because you're aware of this thing and you just have no idea how to actually, like, stretching it doesn't help, being on the trigger ball like doesn't help, like these things kind of not quite fixing it all the way. Yeah, so my gosh, I don't know really how it would be now if I hadn't been able to do the somatic work prior to and with you and Radiance. Like it's been such a gift to experience it, really. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I felt we had our interview, and I think, there were some things that were like you weren't sure if you were going to do it, but then I just kept feeling that you were like knowing there was some part of you that knew like this is necessary. This is like I have to
Yeah.
do this. I have to find a way to do it. The time
Yes.
zone thing, all of that, because
Yes.
this is actually you could feel in your body that this was actually something that was going to make a difference, and the alternative wasn't really an alternative to you at that point.
Yeah. Definitely. And I needed I did need the, what you call the container. Like I needed it. I needed someone to set aside to do the schedule for me. I know that's like that outsourcing of, of like decision making, but I needed that framework to make it happen, to say, I'm doing this thing to my family. And for, I had to ask for the support. I had to do those things to make it work, which was uncomfortable. I didn't really want to lean on anyone. I just, in motherhood, you're already sort of just feel this feeling of losing a lot of your self-efficacy just to go do things that were so easy to decide for yourself. What used to be so easy. So it really was a challenge, but the container and the framework, and once I sort of was like, yep, I'm doing it and I'm in, it was so good to have that accountability. And I just really look forward to showing up. Yeah. So I hope you're
Yeah.
great.
Oh, we loved having you in the group. It was fantastic. And like the structure, and this kind of goes back to one of the things that you first talked about, where it's like we maybe have this tendency in our culture to outsource our like lives or bodies to
Yeah.
an authority, some authority outside of us to tell us what we're doing and if we're doing a good job and if we're doing enough and if we are enough. And right, we kind
Yeah.
of look for those outside sources of validation. And that's not wrong. We might also look for outside structures to help us make a sense of our lives or to, give us that accountability and things like this. Those things are beneficial,
Yeah.
and they need to be also married with our own freedom and our own inner knowing. And it's kind of, I mean, I feel like I'm describing like, the way that we have our somatosensory like part of our brain and the right and left hemispheres. Ideally, we want them to work together. We want to have the ordering and we want to have a linear perspective on being alive. That's helpful. And we got to let the creativity flow, and we got to let that
Yeah.
nonlinear part of us also exist. And when we have
Yes.
too much of one or the other, we're going to feel crazy.
Yeah. And I remember you talking about that early on in the program, like this integration of the both sides. And like when you're in stress and when you feel like you're out of control, it is so divided up there. It's just like I cannot do both. I can't keep the house. I can't sort of keep the family, just lead the family with all the things, all those tiny decisions that really just accumulate, and do the thing where I feel free and this and that and a bit more creative and present and more in touch, like with how I'm feeling and with the kids. Like it just feels so, when you're in stress, like that doesn't happen. It just doesn't work. So yeah, that it's so true. It's like, ultimately you hold the space for yourself with your linear brain, and then all that stuff happens in between. Like you can do both. And I think that's like that speaks to so many people, whether you're looking at releasing pain in your body or not, you're actually just teaching your brain to work better with itself. And who doesn't want that? I mean, that
Right.
just sounds like pretty like a bit of bliss.
Oh yeah. Well, and what people, I didn't realize, we think of our brain as like this organ that's just like up here in our
Yeah,
heads, right? But it's our brain is our body. Our body is our
exactly.
brain. And so
Yeah,
whatever's going on, if we have an area in our body that like we don't go there because it's painful or because it's tight or because it's injured, right? We're not accessing a part of ourselves, a part of our brain structure is not being accessed. And so there's hidden information there about what might be going
yeah,
on with us. I've come to think of it as like the way that we do releasing and connecting in combination in Hanna
yeah,
Somatics is about accessing more of like our body intelligence and more of who we are. We get to actually be in all areas of ourselves instead of a lot of people, we just live in our head and our heart. And if we're lucky, sometimes we go down to our genitals, and that's like pretty much it.
It's so true. And that like accessing those, like we can create it unconsciously or consciously. Like we probably all have examples of where we can think of somewhere in our body and we're just like, oh yeah, I don't go there, I don't think about that, I don't like I don't know how to process it yet, I don't know how to talk with other people about it, like I just, it's just down there, where whatever it is, I just don't know how to deal with it. And we can do that to our whole body. We can literally, yeah, just live from, yeah, the heart, the head. It's really remarkable that we can do that. And I like that reminder again that our body does these things because we're hurting in some way and we can't process it yet. So it's kind of what I do see often coming into, like people coming into the clinic, is this fight between their body. And they'll sometimes say it like that. It's like, oh, why won't my, oh, my shoulder, or why won't my body do this thing? Or, and I'm like, there's this fight between the brain and the body. And I'm just like, how do we got to sort of try and mend that relationship, because we're going to keep getting stuck if that's how we, all kind of think about injury and pain and our body's way of telling us that something's not quite right, or really that it hasn't been right for a long time. So there's this sort of, we can sort of disrespect or hate what the body's telling us a lot of the time. And really, it's like, I think just really learned to lean into this a lot more through Radiance. It's like, yeah, it's just a bit of information. It's not the end of the world. It's some information. If you can listen and tune in, maybe you can change the outcome and work with your body. Go in towards, the knot. I loved that. That example. Like you can't pull the knot. It's just going to get tighter and tighter. Sort of like lean into it and undo it from closer, like coming closer. So
Yeah.
you really know how to do it.
And that's
So
that's proved to be like magical in other areas of my life. I don't know if you've experienced this since Radiance,
yeah.
but I think you were talking about it with your kids and stuff. Like instead of getting into that tug of war energetically with them or emotionally with them,
Yeah.
instead move in closer, even if you're going to put up a
Physically.
boundary, even if you're going to
Yes.
say no about something, you get closer during it instead of the distance.
Absolutely. And it does, like, it's that feeling of like, this is stressful for me. So that it's like that, also that differentiating between what's stressful for me personally, because I'm being triggered by something in my past, versus what is actually happening here. And is this causing me any, stress? So but that experience of like wanting to reel back and sort of seeing your child over there doing this crazy thing, using, being loud or violent, or just like actually being so human and feeling uncomfortable with that. Yeah. And instead trying to, like, the further back you go, they can't regulate. Obviously, they need co-regulation, and that's the job of that's our main job, really, like to create healthy, resilient humans, is to help them co-regulate when they can't. And it's hard when you're trying to, regulate yourself at the same time. But it is like coming in closer and saying, okay, you're having a tough time with something. I'm just going to sit here, or maybe you want to hug, and those things start to happen more naturally now, especially with both of my daughters actually. But they do then kind of just come out of it more quickly because they've been heard. It's like hearing the body, right? It's like hearing your kids. They've been heard. They have a chance to say something if they want to, or share something. Often they don't want to. It's fine. They're actually fine. They get over things pretty quickly if we let them. And then taking what they need, if it's a hug or not, or they just want to play something else, just change and play. And it does resolve it more quickly, but it's not easy if you're not, self-regulated. So for me, that piece of like continuing this work and wanting to share it with other people is that we just will be better for everyone in our lives and ourselves if we know when we're out of sync and know how to come back kind of into some regulations and sync. Yeah.
Yeah, beautifully said. I think I can very much relate to that with my son and just the way that, yeah, children are little humans and they're doing all these human things. And it's so triggering sometimes, especially when it's your kid doing it.
Mm.
You're like, why are
And
you
you're like,
doing
it's me. It's an extension of me. Stop.
no, stop. Yeah. And then I
Yeah.
love how you related that to kind of the way that things show up in our body, and how it feels so frustrating or inconvenient. I've had that happen where it's like, oh, I have all these plans and I'm going to do all these things today. And then my hips or my legs are just like, "Brr, brr, brr." And it's like, oh, come on, get with the program. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is information. This is trying to get my attention about something. And if I lay down and I just spend like 5 to 10 minutes doing some somatics and listening, actively
Yeah.
listening and responding to my body and the sensations that are coming in, how quickly it actually can resolve and I can carry on with my day. But before I had
Yeah.
those tools in the past or that patience, I would just plow through my day being so angry and feeling so frustrated that my legs
Yeah.
were just not on board today with my day.
Yeah. And it's like, who can I vent to about this already? Like, I just need to, like, what an injustice, like unfairness that I'm experiencing today. Like, it's so, yeah, so true. Like, just taking a moment. It's hard to remember to do that. But even just lying down and doing nothing, maybe you just lie down and you
Yes.
just sort of notice yourself, your body, where it's landing. You just, again, give your body a chance to say, hey, this is what's happening. I just want to feel heard. And then it just takes a lot of that uh, tension and stress out of the experience that you're having. It decatastrophizes it. It's just a whole new, just a better way I've found of experiencing those ups and downs and like what a joy and empowering thing to be able to change the outcome. I think that's why we feel so stuck and like we're just going to be stuck because we can't change our circumstances or something. But this is really kind of like an insight into, well, yeah, you can change a little bit. You can change a little
Yeah.
bit. And then you can
And
go and
then
change a little bit more.
a little bit more. Yeah. And that's the
Yeah.
progressiveness of it. I mean, that's part of
Yeah.
why when I first was coming up with the idea of Radiance, and this is funny because it kind of relates to like Bikram yoga too. I've done these things in my life that are very challenging. Somatics and somatic movement is challenging in a totally different way than Bikram yoga is
Yeah.
challenging. To go really tiny, to be patient,
Yeah.
to focus on
Yeah.
relaxing your body, to notice when you're not relaxing and keep inviting yourself to relax, right? To
Yeah.
drudge through the memories or feelings that arise, some people
Yeah.
more than others, right? But I do these things in my life. And oftentimes when I would tell people about them, they'd just be like, oh, well, I'm just not going to do that. Like people I would see at like a bookstore, I had lost all this weight from high school and people were like, oh my God, you look amazing. Like, tell me your weight loss secret. And I'd be like, oh, well, I stopped eating all processed foods and I became a raw vegan and I'm practicing Bikram yoga 5 times a week. And they're
Yeah.
like, oh,
Like,
hard
join me.
pass. Like, not gonna happen. So
Yeah.
I was like, how do I take this thing that nobody's really heard of, Hanna Somatic education, that has all these
Yeah.
incredible benefits and outcomes, and how do I get people to do it long enough to see
Yeah.
a life-changing, body-altering like outcome? Because it's a little bit
Yeah.
every day, even though it's immediate, those changes you felt when you did those videos like before the
Mm.
program, you felt changes
Mm.
immediately. You built neural
Yeah.
pathways you didn't have before, but it takes
Yeah.
time to shift from how things have been in your body to how things could be, right? And
Absolutely.
so
Yeah.
that was like, I'm like, I got to create something that's like half a year long. I got to create a container that challenges people to stick with this because it's easy to think that this doesn't work if the benefits aren't right there, if you're not just totally out of your pain in like a month, right?
Absolutely. Or to also think that you only need to do a little bit to be out of pain. Like for me, I was like, wow, I just did this like tiny little bit before Radiance. And like, but if not for Radiance, I would have sort of just still been come back to the stuckness. Like the side bend now for me doesn't create that effect. Like I don't get the same feeling from the side bend that I did when I first tried it. I was like, this is a miracle. Like, what is this thing? I don't know why the tension in my back is gone. But that doesn't happen the same way because I'm not the same body. Like, it's not the same body. So if you don't sort of give it the chance to like marinate in it for a bit, then you just won't go through the cycles like you won't kind of go through the pain thing and then come out of the pain, the discomfort, and then go through the next layer and kind of get this sense of ongoingness, progression, sort of thing that will be important for the rest of your life, as long as you want to keep kind of clearing that stress and moving a bit more freely and thinking a bit more flexibly, and just kind of that having a bit more sense of like ease, and I think like playfulness, like you're more yourself, that you know who you were as a kid, like before any of this stuff happened, life.
Right.
Before free and easy. Yeah. So yeah, I think the contain like that the duration is important. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And then tell us a little bit about like in your relationship. I mean, you touched on this a little bit, your relationship to motherhood now compared to how it felt for you after your second daughter was born, in that way that you kind of felt like your body was given over to them versus how
Yeah.
you experience your body and your motherhood now.
Look, some of that is time and just adapting to having two children versus one. That was hard. That was a hard change for me. But I think now, like I feel with the processing and work that I've done, I feel more separate in a good way from my kids, I suppose. I'm always will always be intricately linked, and because of like the things I see them do, I'm like, wow, this we really are sort of bound by blood, but also we, you know, just the deep care and love that you have for your children. But there's this sense of being able to assert myself, even with my children, better, you know, more and more as I practice the skill, to set boundaries and to accept the emotion that might come with that. And to have, I guess, a clearer reason for why the boundary is there, or like that has been helpful. I feel certainly like I'm healing that wound of just feeling completely in the freeze stress response during my labor. Like when I think about that time, it still gives me like a bit of a stress response, but I'm much more detached from it. I can see what happened. I'm starting to process that more. I can see how things could have been different. And that's valuable. Not, I think some people kind of think, oh, but you can't change it. It's like, yeah, I can't change that, but I can imagine how a different possibility might have arisen. And when I find myself in the future in a position where I feel like I'm not advocating for myself and no one else is advocating for me, like, what is this space? Where are the people who are supposed to be supporting me through this? And where am I? Like, you know, that may first and foremost, it does, you know, I do reflect on it to think, what would I do differently? And how do I create more practice making decisions that serve me rather than leaning in too much to what other people think about me. Listen to the professional opinion because that's what people are trained in doing. And then also learn how to be a better manager for myself. So I think that's slowly changing. And my children give me opportunities every single day to practice being a better manager for myself. Like, not, I think one thing, like, we try to do things sometimes as mums or parents, like sort ourselves out so that we can then be available. And I think that's true to a degree. I think it's also valuable to let your kids see that you sort yourself out as well as feeding them, you feed yourself. Like, you don't have to do all that stuff in sort of like packaged away in isolation and then tend to the kids, or have a shower and then like it can all, they can see you taking care of yourself there, you know. That's also a really empowering place to be, so that they can see, oh yeah, it's okay for me to take care of myself too as they grow. So I think I'm certainly feeling much more in control of myself since we first met. I can picture that, I can feel that person that was on that call that first time with you, and it was just like a shell. Like, I just remember being a bit of a shell and thinking, how will I ever put myself back together, because I don't even know who I was before this event happened.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it just pulled the rug
Yeah.
out. But like, it just it would not have the same effect on me at this stage, at this point. It just wouldn't. Just the wisdom that has come with that experience and with healing from it. I just cannot see the possible, like I cannot imagine myself being in that place again. I mean, maybe life will surprise me, but I just feel like I have so much more in my skill set now to like mediate stress when it's coming up and speak up when I need to so that I don't get to that place of feeling very alone, very out of control, unsure about, what my body, my brain will, if it'll be able to heal and change and support my kids. So yeah, just yeah, it's been very complimentary to this journey of like early years of motherhood.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think that, what you said about going back and imagining what you would do differently. And I personally believe healing is nonlinear and kind of quantum in that way, where we can like
Yeah.
do things differently in this moment that we, didn't do differently in that moment. And in a way, it's almost like we're going back and healing that thing that we
Yeah.
didn't do the way that we needed to then. We're doing it right now. And so that part of us
Yes.
is getting soothed. And then we look back
Totally.
on that scenario and it's not nearly as sharp or painful because we're already rectifying it. We're resetting it. We're doing it differently right now.
Yeah, and that idea that it's not linear, and neither are our lives really. Like, if we believe that, then we'll only believe that our next step is the accumulation of everything that came before. Like, there's only one option, right? Like, so it is that, like, continuously kind of going back and thinking forward, not in that stress way where it's like, oh, what's going to happen? What did happen? But in a way that you're entertaining these possibilities so that really what comes next is infinite possibility. Like, who knows what that next thing is? There are many things that could happen, and you're not bound to this road that you think, one way. At one point you might have thought that way. Maybe we do get to those brain bits where we're just like, this is the only way. There's
Yeah.
only one way. This is the way I've arrived here, and I can only keep going in this one way. Like, it just opens up these
Yeah.
possibilities. That's a really cool way to look at it, that timeline. Like, it's
Yeah.
that quantum approach. Yeah.
Totally. Well, and that makes me think of, the last part of the cat stretch series that we do, where we're training your eyes to move
Yeah.
differently than the rest of your torso. And the way that we're
Yeah.
undoing that stress pattern of the tunnel vision of only one
Yeah.
way and all the
Yeah.
muscles of our torso getting linked up with our ocular motor nerve to look
Yeah.
for like a periscope to look for the danger in front of us there,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
we're opening up the possibilities of what we can see on our horizon, and we're letting go of that tunnel vision. We're widening our internal gaze,
Yeah.
right? And that is essentially what we just talked about, is being able to see
Absolutely.
a wider framework of
Yeah.
possibility in the moment that's not just only because of what was pre-programmed in us before. It's not
Yeah.
just all these things happen and so this now happens. It's
Yeah.
something more creative and spontaneous that occurs.
Totally. And I love that because you're in that seated position, right? And then that's stable, that's the present, that's the thing. And then you do have this like, oh, what are the possibilities as you're kind of moving your eyes and dissociating those movements with the upper body and the head and then the eyes. Like, it's so true. Like, it's such a, like, even just thinking about it, and I love that too about somatics, like, can't move today, just visualize it. Like, even just thinking about it, you're sort of giving yourself the opportunity to imagine that there are possibilities, and that you'll know, and that you'll know what is right for you at the time, because you've got this deeper sense of knowing for yourself what is sort of, what does feel good for you, what doesn't feel good for you, and not just feeling good but actually being good, feeling like satisfactorily like good and right, and of value, like of value to your
Yeah.
life at every moment in time. Yeah.
Mm. It's interesting because those eye movements are quite powerful. I mean, I like to warn people because, some of it I just started doing on my own with YouTube videos, and there
Yeah.
were things I went through that were really dramatic, like for me
Yeah.
personally, that I
Yeah.
didn't realize were actually related to that. And now when I'm working with clients and they have kind of dramatic results from like eye movement stuff, like being
Mhm.
really nauseated, having all
Yep.
kinds of memories flood back. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I remember when that happened to me and I did not have anybody guiding me through it. I would have
Yeah.
had such a much easier time if I
Yeah.
had someone explaining to me and
Good
guiding me through
times.
this.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons that, there's plenty of stuff on YouTube. I don't have my YouTube videos just for anybody to use because I prefer that people are using my videos who actually have some guidance with it,
Yep.
even if they've just done a couple of sessions with me, so that I can get a sense for, developing that rapport where they can ask me a question and they don't have to go through their somatic unraveling like by themselves.
Yeah.
Because that wasn't the most pleasant thing for me, if I'm totally honest. I could have used
Yeah.
Radiance myself when I first
Yeah.
was going through this. It's probably why I
Right.
created
I
it.
mean, totally. I mean, that's what we do. Like, that's how we kind of push the envelope, is like, I think that's such important work to share what we have known to be true, like through our own work, and then share that with others in a way that's better than the way we learned it, because that's how we evolve and learn. And that's like due diligence, right? In this space where we're like working with other people, it's like, let's try and imagine that there's an even better way. Like, this is great, and let's try and do it even better. More support, more, yeah. So, like, definitely, like, Radiance manifested because of your experience. So, yeah,
Yeah. I also love that, you know, launching this in the way that I did and just the way that people like you, who, I mean, I don't think we really talked much at our Bikram yoga teacher training. There were like
no,
400 people. It was
yeah,
crazy number
no,
of people, and we weren't in the same group, but we
no,
stayed connected over the internet,
yeah,
and there you go. Like we can end up in each other's worlds again. And I just love that because, there is so much to offer other yoga teachers in somatics if they're
mhm,
interested, if they
yeah,
are curious, if there's a way in. I'm all
yeah,
here for it. I want to have that conversation. I want to like take apart like the ways in which we have trapped ourselves into like the way it has to be done, and how could we
yeah,
break free of that and start to explore and find our own voice in teaching and deepen our soul in our teaching, because I don't
yeah,
think that the somatic approach has to be opposing any kind of yogic practice. Even ones that
mm,
seem pretty like aggressive, I even think those ones can benefit from somatics. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Just like anybody can benefit from like drinking water. We could all benefit from
yeah,
releasing our muscle fibers a little bit, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. 100%. Yeah, it's just like finding that way in, like you said, like, we didn't really know each other, but we went to this thing. We both independently decided to attend this thing, and there's more to it than just that thing, right? Like, we obviously have interests that align that we didn't know about at that time. Whether we like would have had a conversation and known that then, probably not. Like, we were just so into that one way. But it's like, it is a reminder that the things we do are not all of us. And it's good to remind, like, I like to remind myself of that too, because what we do does not define us. It's not, it doesn't put you in a box or label you this or that. Like, you are so much more than the things that you do. So it's yeah, it's I think that's like such a good reminder, the way that we met and how we're talking here today. Yeah, these little moments where you come into contact with other people, then there's so much more there than you realized at the time, and more common ground, really, at the time than at the time. So, yeah, quite amazing.
Yeah, I'm just so impressed with you, and it's so great to see you on this call, so full of just, excitement and life and passion, and so very different than the person that I was meeting on that, call. And, how beautiful that you got to have Radiance at that postpartum time. One of the
Yeah.
women who's in the summer round of Radiance right now just had her first baby, and she's doing Radiance for the second time. She did
Oh,
it
that's
before with
exciting.
Beth, actually. She was in Beth's cohort,
Oh,
but now
yeah.
she's really recognizing that postpartum, especially with her first child, and I know she's going to listen to this and she's going to love your story. She's realizing that this is like such an essential way that she can support herself in this new process of coming into motherhood. And she's going to have,
She's
just
like a
like you
step
have.
ahead. Yeah, but she's like, she's got that wisdom already, to sort of that seed planted, to be like, yeah, I'm going to go again. I'm going to go and remind myself even more of like sort of how to use this skill in my life, because it's a big, yeah, it's a big change when you sort of start caring for someone else and all of that. So that's so exciting. I'm excited to hear how she goes.
Yeah. Do you ever do somatics with your kids? Have you ever tried it a little bit with them?
No, they've seen me. Okay, well, not hard no. Like my older daughter will lie down next to me, and it's the sweetest thing. She'll kind of do the side, she'll do her version of the side bend. And you know what? When she's doing that, because we'll do other things that are physical, right? Like we'll be like animals, and she'll show me some of her exercises, and there's a pace to it, right? And when she lies down and does the somatics next to me, or does it, what I do notice is there's a change in her like pace and her face. It's just a little bit slower. So she's picking up. I'm not teaching her anything, or like I'm just doing it. And she's sort of realizing this is a little bit different to the other movement that we do. Like she doesn't come in and like just crank out this like side bendy thing. She sort of has this awareness of like, oh, now mum's doing this like quieter, sort of slower thing. And she brings that. I mean, maybe she's there for a minute, 30 seconds or a minute. But it's palpable even to her that this is a different kind of thing. So I wouldn't say I've done it with her intentionally, but she's been exposed to it. Yeah.
Yeah. And she's going to grow up in a world where her mother has this knowledge that most people don't have. And when stuff comes up, you're going to be like, hey, try this out. And she's going to grow up with that as something that's just part of her reality, which is
I
really,
hope
really
so.
cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope so.
Oh, well, this has been such an amazing conversation, and I just appreciate you so much with your willingness to share about your experience and about the challenges that you were facing. And I'm so glad that you took the leap into the unknown and said yes
You
to
too.
being part of this community. And, I'm excited to continue to share this work with you. And, like, would love to get you I mean, someday it'll happen. I'll be running a training for the hands-on work because I don't want it to die out in the world. And I want to
Yeah.
be able to have someone in Australia that can be like, go to them. They can do this
Yeah.
special hands-on thing with you.
Tell me when you're doing it, Amy. It'll all happen at the
Fabulous.
right time. It'll all happen at the right time. Thank you so much for your work and for making it available, and like, yeah, that for presenting an opportunity I had to take and making it easier for me to get there by understanding where I was at, pretty much. So you've always been good at that. And yeah, much appreciated. I'm sure everyone who's worked with you would say the same thing.
Thank you. Yeah, I really bring my utmost because yeah, this work has really changed my life and there's just yeah, I just couldn't bring anything less than my utmost, and I mean, I'm still human and
Yeah.
stuff comes up, but like it's really my passion and I feel like humanity needs this and so the stakes are high and so that's what keeps me bringing my utmost every time I can.
Yeah. Awesome. Love it.
All right. Well, thank you again for this conversation. If anybody has, something they want to share with you, are you comfortable with people reaching out to you on in what kind of way could they reach out to you if you wanted to chat with you or comment about the experiences you had?
Yeah, absolutely. So probably email.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Well, we'll put that in the show notes and yeah, thank you again. And we will see each other soon.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks so much.
You've been listening to the Free Your Soma podcast. To find out more information about today's guest, check the show notes. And to find out more information about me, Amy Takaya, and the Radiance program, visit www.freeyoursoma.com.